You're not who you think you are. Right now, as you're watching this, there's another version of you operating in the shadows, making decisions, influencing your choices, sabotaging your relationships, and you have no idea it's there. Carl Jung called this your shadow. It's every part of yourself you've rejected, denied, or hidden away. The anger you were told to suppress, the desires you were taught to shame, the power you were afraid to claim. All of it is still inside you, growing stronger in the darkness, controlling your life from behind the scenes. Most people spend their entire lives running from their shadow. They pretend it doesn't exist. They project it onto others. They let it destroy everything they build. But the people who understand their shadow, they don't run from it. They integrate it. They transform their hidden darkness into unstoppable power. Today, you're going to discover the 8 shadow traits that are secretly controlling your life. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to stop being controlled by them and start using them as fuel for transformation. Drop this in the comments. I see my shadow now. Let's begin. Shadow trait 1, Repressed Rage. You think you're a calm person, patient, understanding, never angry. But Jung knew the truth. That anger you suppress doesn't disappear. It goes into the shadow. And from there, it controls you in ways you don't recognize. Passive aggression, silent resentment, sudden explosive reactions to small things, self-sabotage when you're about to succeed. That's not random. That's your repressed rage finding ways to express itself. Society taught you that anger is bad, that good people don't get angry, that expressing rage makes you toxic or violent. So you pushed it down, you swallowed it, you pretended it wasn't there. But energy doesn't disappear. It transforms. Your unexpressed anger became a shadow controlling your behavior without your awareness. Here's what most people don't understand about rage. It's not inherently destructive. Rage is life force. It's the energy that says this is wrong and I won't accept it. It's the fuel that drives change, sets boundaries, and demands respect. When you repress it, you don't eliminate it. You just hand control over to your unconscious shadow. And your shadow doesn't use rage intelligently. It leaks out sideways, ruins relationships, destroys opportunities, makes you hate yourself for reactions you can't explain. Jung said the shadow must be integrated, not eliminated. Integration means acknowledging your rage exists, feeling it consciously, understanding what it's protecting, then choosing how to express it constructively. Not explosive destruction, not passive poison, conscious, powerful expression. When you integrate your rage, it stops controlling you. It becomes a tool you control. That's shadow work. Affirmation: I acknowledge my rage. Shadow trait 2, hidden selfishness. You pride yourself on being generous, giving, always putting others first. But deep in your shadow lives a part of you that's purely selfish. That wants to take, that wants to claim, that wants to say no without guilt. You've rejected this part so completely that it controls you through resentment. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you give when you want to keep, every time you sacrifice yourself for someone who wouldn't do the same, your shadow is keeping score, building resentment, creating a debt you'll collect in destructive ways. Sudden coldness toward people you helped, secretly hoping they fail, feeling satisfaction when they struggle. That's your shadow's revenge for all the selflessness you performed while denying your own needs. The dark truth: selfishness isn't evil. It's self-preservation. Every person must have boundaries, must protect their resources, must say no to demands that drain them. But you were taught that self-interest equals bad character, so you rejected that part of yourself. And now it lives in your shadow, sabotaging your relationships from behind the scenes. Integration means accepting that you have legitimate selfish needs. That wanting things for yourself isn't wrong. That protecting your time, energy, and resources is necessary for survival. When you consciously own your selfishness, you stop being controlled by unconscious resentment. You set clear boundaries without guilt. You give from genuine generosity, not performative sacrifice. That's power. Affirmation: my needs matter too. Shadow trait 3, secret arrogance. You think you're humble, down to earth, no ego, but in your shadow lives a part that thinks you're better than everyone else. Smarter, more aware, more evolved. You've hidden this so deeply that you don't recognize it when it controls your behavior. The subtle condescension when someone doesn't understand something you find obvious. The quiet superiority when you watch people make mistakes you wouldn't make. the hidden judgment of people who haven't done the inner work you've done. This shadow arrogance is especially dangerous because it disguises itself as virtue. You tell yourself you're just seeing reality clearly, that you're not being arrogant, you're being honest. But Jung understood that the shadow always justifies itself. Your hidden arrogance creates isolation. People sense it even when you don't express it. They feel judged. They pull away. And you tell yourself it's because they can't handle your authenticity. That's the shadow talking. The integration path isn't to become genuinely humble by forcing yourself to feel less capable. That's just creating another shadow. Real integration means acknowledging that yes, you have areas of genuine skill and awareness, and simultaneously recognizing that everyone has different strengths. That being advanced in one area doesn't make you superior as a person. That judgment of others is usually projection of what you fear in yourself. When you integrate your arrogance, something interesting happens. You stop needing to prove your intelligence. You stop keeping score of who's more evolved. You can recognize your abilities without using them to elevate yourself above others. That's real confidence. That's integrated shadow. Affirmation: I release superiority. Shadow trait 4, buried weakness. You show the world strength, capability, independence. But in your shadow lives the part of you that's weak, dependent, and afraid. You've rejected this so completely that it controls you through overcompensation, never asking for help even when you need it, refusing to show vulnerability even in intimate relationships, working yourself into exhaustion to prove you're strong enough. That's not strength. That's your shadow weakness controlling you by making you perform constant strength. Jung said what we resist persists. The more you deny your weakness, the more it dominates your behavior. Because real weakness isn't feeling vulnerable. Real weakness is being unable to access your vulnerability when the situation requires it. Being unable to admit you don't know something. Unable to ask for support. Unable to show the human fragility that creates genuine connection. The shadow weakness doesn't just make you lonely by preventing intimacy. It makes you actually weaker by preventing you from developing through collaboration. You stay stuck in patterns because you won't admit you need guidance. You burn out repeatedly because you won't acknowledge your limits. Your fear of appearing weak makes you genuinely less capable. Integration means accepting that you contain both strength and weakness. That needing help doesn't negate your power. That vulnerability in appropriate contexts is actually a display of confidence. When you integrate your weakness, you stop performing strength. You access real strength, the kind that asks for help when it's efficient, shows vulnerability when it deepens connection, admits mistakes when it accelerates growth. Affirmation: I accept my vulnerability. Shadow trait 5, hidden cruelty. You see yourself as kind, compassionate, empathetic, but your shadow contains a part that wants to hurt, to dominate, to see others suffer. This isn't evil. It's human. Every person has this capacity, but you've denied it so completely that it expresses through unconscious cruelty you don't recognize as cruelty. The jokes that cut too deep disguised as humor. The truths you tell that aren't meant to help but to wound. The help you offer that secretly makes people feel incompetent. The compassion you show that contains hidden condescension. Jung understood that the shadow contains all our rejected impulses, and cruelty is one of most rejected. We're taught from childhood that cruelty is unacceptable, that good people don't want to hurt others, so we repress that impulse, and it goes into the shadow where it operates without our conscious control or awareness. The integrated person doesn't become cruel. They become honest about their capacity for cruelty. They acknowledge that yes, sometimes they feel the impulse to hurt, and that awareness allows them to choose, to understand when that impulse is their shadow speaking, to recognize when they're being subtly cruel without admitting it. That consciousness prevents the unconscious cruelty that damages relationships while maintaining your self-image as kind. Integration doesn't mean acting on cruel impulses. It means acknowledging they exist, understanding what triggers them, recognizing them when they arise, and choosing conscious responses instead of unconscious shadow expressions. When you own your cruelty, it stops owning you. Affirmation: I see my darkness. Shadow trait 6, suppressed sexuality. Whatever your relationship with sexuality, your shadow contains the parts you've rejected, the desires you judge, the fantasies you shame, the aspects of sexual expression you've labeled as wrong or dirty. And these suppressed elements don't disappear. They control you through shame, compulsion, and self-sabotage. Jung lived in a time of intense sexual repression, and he saw clearly how this created shadow pathology. When sexuality is rejected instead of integrated, it becomes a destructive force operating from the unconscious. This isn't about acting on every desire. It's about acknowledging what exists without shame, so it stops controlling you from the shadows. The person who completely denies their sexuality often becomes controlled by it in unconscious ways. Inappropriate attractions they don't understand, compulsive behaviors they can't stop, shame spirals that destroy their self-worth. The integration path isn't to act on everything or to become sexually obsessed. It's to consciously acknowledge your sexual nature without judgment, to understand your desires without being controlled by shame or compulsion. When sexual aspects of your shadow are integrated, something shifts. You stop being controlled by shame. You stop being driven by compulsion. You can acknowledge sexual thoughts and feelings without acting inappropriately or spiraling into self-hatred. That's freedom. That's integration. Affirmation: I accept my nature. Shadow trait 7, concealed power. This is perhaps the most dangerous shadow trait because society actively encourages you to hide it. You've been taught that wanting power is bad. That ambition is selfish. That dominance is toxic. So you've pushed your natural drive for power into the shadow. And now it controls you through unconscious power games you don't recognize as power games. The competitive resentment you feel when someone succeeds. The subtle undermining of people who threaten your position. The false humility that's actually manipulation. The victim identity that gives you covert control. These are all your repressed power drive expressing through shadow channels. Because the desire for power doesn't go away when you reject it. It just operates unconsciously. Jung understood that the will to power is a fundamental human drive. It's not good or evil. It's energy. When you consciously own your desire for power, you can channel it constructively. Build things. Create impact. Lead effectively. But when you deny it and push it into shadow, it becomes manipulative, passive-aggressive, destructive. It sabotages others while maintaining your self-image as someone who doesn't care about power. Integration means acknowledging that yes, you want power. You want influence. You want control over your life and impact on the world. That's not evil. That's human. When you own this consciously, you stop playing unconscious power games. You pursue power directly and ethically. You lead without manipulation. You compete without resentment. Affirmation: I claim my power. Shadow trait 8, the unlived life. This is the deepest shadow trait. It's not about a specific impulse or feeling. It's about all the potential versions of yourself you rejected. The artist you could have been but chose safety instead. The rebel you suppressed to fit in. The leader you denied because it scared you. Every path not taken lives in your shadow. And from there it haunts you. Jung called this the unlived life. It's the source of midlife crises, sudden life upheavals, and the nagging sense that you're not living as yourself. Your shadow contains every authentic impulse you've rejected to meet others' expectations, to maintain relationships, to appear acceptable. And those rejected potentials don't die. They create depression, anxiety, and the feeling that life is somehow unreal or not truly yours. The most tragic shadow is the one that contains your authentic self. When you've rejected your true nature so completely that the real you exists only in darkness, controlling you through dissatisfaction you can't name, creating symptoms you can't explain, sabotaging success that doesn't align with who you really are. Integration of the unlived life doesn't mean destroying everything and starting over. Though sometimes it does mean that. It means acknowledging what you've rejected, grieving the paths not taken, and finding ways to express those rejected aspects even within your current life. Maybe you can't become a full-time artist, but you can stop pretending you don't have artistic impulses. Maybe you can't completely rebel against society, but you can stop performing conformity that kills your soul. When you integrate your unlived life, you stop feeling like you're waiting for your real life to begin. You stop resenting the choices you've made. You find ways to be more authentically yourself within whatever structure you've created. That's not compromise. That's integration. That's becoming whole. Affirmation: I honor my authentic self. You've now seen the 8 shadow traits secretly controlling your life. Repressed rage, hidden selfishness, secret arrogance, buried weakness, hidden cruelty, suppressed sexuality, concealed power, the unlived life. Every single one exists in your shadow right now, influencing your choices. sabotaging your relationships, creating symptoms you can't explain. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's your power source. Every rejected part of yourself contains energy, capacity, strength. When you keep it in darkness, that energy works against you. When you bring it into consciousness and integrate it, that same energy becomes fuel for transformation. Shadow work isn't comfortable. It requires you to look at parts of yourself you've spent years denying, to admit truths about your nature that society taught you to hide, to own impulses and desires you've been judging as wrong. But that discomfort is the price of freedom, because you can't be controlled by what you've consciously integrated. The people who do this work become different. They stop being controlled by unconscious impulses. They stop projecting their shadow onto others. They stop sabotaging themselves. They become whole, not perfect, not without darkness, but conscious of their darkness, integrated with their darkness, using their darkness as power instead of being used by it. This is advanced psychology. This is deep work. This is what separates those who understand themselves from those who remain mysteries to themselves. Jung gave you the map. The 8 shadow traits are your starting point. Now you have to do the work. Acknowledge what you've denied. Feel what you've suppressed. Integrate what you've rejected. That's the path to becoming whole. Drop this final affirmation, I integrate my shadow. And remember, the goal isn't to eliminate your darkness. The goal is to stop being controlled by it, to make it conscious, to integrate it, to transform it from your hidden enemy into your greatest source of power. Think deeper. Feel less. Know more. This is the Hidden Mindset.